And good morning, everyone, and welcome to Small Biz Matters, the half-hour program where you work on your business rather than in it. Thanks for joining me. I am Alexi Boyd, your trusted steed, guiding you on the path of small business success. Well, not really, just trying to get by, really, for small businesses. Today I've got in the room Gavin Vermas from RightServe, and we're talking about a really interesting topic. And the reason why it's so interesting is because a lot of you have told us that it is something that you find confusing. It's something that you find, it's a bit of a misnomer. It's difficult to understand as a business because we're not IT professionals, and in fact a lot of IT professionals don't understand it. And today we're talking about the cloud. And it's funny, Gavin, how this object which we see every day has suddenly become this, it's taken on a different life of its own. It's like the letter I.
Yes.
The letter I no longer means the letter I anymore. It has a different meaning these days. So tell me a little bit about yourself and what journey led you into cloud-based server expertise.
Yes. Hi, Alexi. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for being on the show.
I run a little hybrid cloud IT business, which sounds extremely fancy. But really what it is about providing small businesses with IT-related services. Today, that means we have to understand what the cloud is and how it developed. So I think one of the things you were alluding to there was the evolution we've sort of gone through, perhaps in the last maybe 10, 15 years, to get towards what is now commonly known as cloud computing. Okay. And it wasn't an overnight thing. The development of cloud computing today really started and was built on sort of 4 or 5 significant developments in IT. They probably started all the way back in the 1960s, the mainframe era and the concept of virtualization, through to, I suppose, when everybody started paying attention to IT, which is the PC era, the likes of Microsoft and the first what are called packaged applications like Word and Excel and PowerPoint.
And the Office package, which we all know and love so well.
Yeah, exactly, yes. And moving through the 90s towards the development of the internet, where computers were sort of connected together. The ideas of virtualization reappeared sort of in the noughties when Mr. Jobs at Apple started developing the idea of being able to run personalized applications, or mini apps as they're now called, on your iPhones. And then suddenly there was an opportunity probably about 10 years ago to completely virtualize the environments that applications are running in. Now, what that means is it's like taking a computer and installing 10 computers on top of it. And the reason one might want to do that is because each computer is doing very, very different things. So one's doing a very, very small little tiny thing in the corner over here. You don't need a lot of resources. Let's put it in a virtualized, almost like a container. And we're still going to connect it to the internet. We're still going to make it available on networks. Now, that idea is called cloud computing. So the companies that have these vast data centers, I'm sure you've heard about them, they're the people who run kind of the underlying hardware that the cloud computing network relies on. But then there are companies like ourselves who use that infrastructure to put applications like Office and email and your website, okay, in these little containers. And that actually is called cloud computing. The reason it's called cloud is because it's a bit amorphous. You're not quite sure where your software is running. From the point of view of exactly, the location. It's become a big contentious issue.
And a secretive one.
Absolutely, around cloud computing. But it gives you a whole bunch of flexible benefits, or flexibility and additional benefits, including stuff like being able to move your software around, being able to do things like copy entire environments very, very quickly. All sorts of other things, administrative things, become much easier and lower cost. So there's significant benefits to cloud computing, significant benefits.
It's interesting what you were saying about the location, because I think that that's one of the stumbling blocks that a lot of people who don't have a lot of experience with IT in particular, especially with cloud computing, that they don't understand. Now, let me explain to you what I think I know and then you can correct me and say, well, not exactly.
Okay.
So my understanding is that, say, for example, I want to use Google Drive, and I'm using that as my server. So I'm a little business and I've got everything sitting on Google Drive.
Yes.
I've read up on it. I understand the security parameters and the ramifications. We'll get into that a little bit later. But I understand that my data is sitting on a server in one location, but it is also being backed up in another server in another country in another location across several. It's happening.
Locales,
It's happening not when I know it, and it's happening regularly. So I don't have to worry about my data being lost. I mean, I think the thing that people liked about having their server under their desk, nice and safe and there was no chance that it could be lost. I mean, there's every chance in the world that the server might die and take everything with it. But people, because they don't see it and they can't tangibly understand the location of their data, they worry that it's going to disappear. And because it's not under their responsibility anymore, somebody else has that responsibility. And even worse, someone overseas who's not, entangled in the Australian consumer law also has that data. So how do you reassure those people who are so used to having that server, not so much anymore, but used to having that server sitting under their desk where they can tangibly and physically see it, the location of it there and then, against, well, there's going to be some of your data there, some of your data there. It's always backing up, and your agreement is with a massive organisation that really couldn't give two hoots about you.
Look, I think the short answer to that is it's always about the details in terms of which package you purchase from your cloud provider. The geographic locations, and you're quite correct, your applications or your data may be replicated across multiple geographic locations by default. You've got to be quite careful about which package you pick up, subscribe to, and remember that the public cloud, which is kind of what we're talking about here, the so-called public cloud, is really about self-service. So you're doing the evaluation of whether or not your data as a business, you're the business owner, you're perhaps the IT manager, it's really about you making sure that you pick the right package so that your data doesn't get suddenly exported to some server in Eastern Europe, and unbeknownst to you, it disappears off into the Ethernet. Now, I don't think that's necessarily a default on a lot of the packages that are out there, but it's quite easy to lose track of where your data is going, and it's related to cost. Okay, the cheaper the service from whatever cloud provider, you probably want to look at some of the details as to exactly where your data is and is being backed up or not, being replicated or not. So what we've sort of tried to specialize in is offering a service, obviously, around small businesses, depending on the type of business they're running, what sort of cloud-based services, where they're replicated to, Australia only. I mean, a good example are companies that just based on company law, they're actually restricted from allowing any of their customer data to leave Australian shores. So that level of assurance then needs to be sort of filtered through from whatever packages you pick up, we design, we deploy for our customers. Now, likewise, there are customers that want to see their data replicated to Singapore, say. They want it to be replicated securely. For the assurance of, say, I don't know, failover or something like that. I mean, a good example there would be perhaps a financial institution that already has presence in Asia, okay? All 4 banks, for instance, in Australia have some level of replication offshore, and they're very, very careful about how they do it, to which cloud providers, in which data centers. So the devil is in the detail in terms of which packages you pick up. As a small business, we're in the business of trying to advise at least on the basics of what cloud services are going to fit the kind of business you're in. So
it sounds to me that as a small business, it doesn't really matter what level of data. I mean, okay, so let's take my business for an example. I'm a bookkeeper. Yes. I have admin. We're not talking about massively huge movie files or anything like that, or massive data files, or even a large customer base file or anything like that. So I'm quite comfortable with that information sitting on the internet and sitting just in Google Drive. Right. To take that to a more professional level, for want of a better word. If I was to engage with a company such as RightServe, what it means is that I'm then assured as to what's happening with my data. I know where it sits.
Yes.
And what's interesting about that, when you brought up the fact that people don't know where it is, I actually need to know. As a bookkeeper, one of our requirements as a professional organisation is to inform our clients, because we've got financial data, where their data is sitting.
Yes.
So I need to know which, and it's as simple as just letting them know which countries they're in.
Yes.
But I guess taking it to the next level, even as something as small as I am, that would give me the assurity to know location, to know where, what's happening with the data, where it's being backed up to.
Correct.
Does it give you any sort of, engaging with a company like RightServe, does it give you any sort of guarantees to know that the data's not going to disappear? Because I guess being with Google Drive, as I said, very small fish in a very big pond.
Yes.
Do they really give two hoots?
Yes. Look, I think they probably, if you phone up Google, they probably say we do give a hoot. And I'd like to think that, I'm a user of Google as well. I'd like to think that they do. But the reality of the situation is, you're right. You're a small business. My customers are small businesses. The kind of guarantee that I think businesses would like to see is that all of the pieces of the puzzle are at least being able to be identified. So your data is sitting in a specific geographic location or locations, okay? And it's not just an amorphous, we're going to put your, bookkeeping files on the east coast of, Australia. It's sitting in this particular data center. This particular environment has got some level of certification in terms of security, both at the sort of physical and at the network level. And that's something that you can ask as a business owner, and you should be able to get some sort of answers, certificates, certification processes that those data centers or those cloud providers have been through to say, no, we're not going to take your data and accidentally copy it to, some strange location just because we thought it was a great thing to do from a cost perspective. And there are questions about the quality of, say, the backups, how frequently they're made. You should be asking and getting choices in terms of where your data is backed up, like on-site only or secure off-site to another location where you're quite comfortable with where that data is being stored. The reason you might want to do that is, once again, for redundancy purposes. But both of those locations, either a primary or a secondary, you need to be able to ask and answer those questions. Is it secure? Are there certifications? Are there real people there? Is somebody going to be able to just up and walk out the door with my client files? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because the security in these sort of places can be incredibly tight. And I think that's maybe one of the questions people might ask is the location is important. You have that assurity. You'd like to think you have that assurity through certification if it is located in, say, Australia or America or in Europe. But by the same token, there's always likely to be a location such as the Middle East or a cave in Saudi Arabia. I know that somebody keeps on talking about there's a cave with these massive servers.
I know.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing because of security, but it's good to have the choice and it's good to ask the questions.
Look, one thing I've noticed for small business is the growing impact of how businesses in general, small and medium businesses, react to the private and privacy laws that have sort of been beefed up recently in Australia. And a lot of the questions that I've gotten over the past sort of 6 months have been around how my customers ask and answer the questions that they're getting from their customers about how they treat the private information that they get. And unfortunately, this is sort of a stack of service providers. They're providing an accounting service, you're providing a bookkeeping service, you're 100% reliant on us as an IT service provider to say, okay, for the private information, these are the principles, they're called privacy principles, under law that we adhere to, you would like to adhere to as your business. We can support you as a service provider to say, no, we have the ability to, for instance, find somebody's personal information, personal file, and delete them if they request this. That's just it's a good example of what's written into privacy law, which every small business who's collecting any of this information needs to be able to say they can do. Now, you can't really do that without being able to
to know where exactly
where it is. You know what I mean? To be able to say, okay, I can phone someone and say, could I at least have some sort of level of confidence that that's been deleted on request from the customer. That's quite hard to achieve unless you can, you have those things in place.
And that's one of the good questions that you should be asking if you are to engage with a company where you're taking everything and putting it into a cloud-based server.
Correct.
On a professional level, where you actually have this engagement with a contractor such as yourselves,
yes.
and you know what they do. You can ask those questions, and I think that's a little bit of a surety with outsourcing that level of
business. That's correct. Yes. So what we're doing is we're saying, RightServe not only adheres, we've got our own privacy policy, we've got our own privacy principles. These are things that our customers can then leverage off of to say, right, okay, these are the levels of, they're not quite guarantees, but they're certainly adherence. And there's an ombudsman, and the whole process is designed to say, look, we've put forth these principles as a business, so have we, so have our suppliers, and we're going to try and protect our customers.
There is that level of surety you can give your own clients as well. Yeah. Look, we're going to take a short break here on Small Biz Matters. You're listening to Triple H 100.1 FM. Here's some community service announcements. We'll be back shortly. I'm just going to turn off Snora Jones there. We only had one community service announcement drop in. Normally we have 2 or 3 of those. You're listening to Small Biz Matters on Triple H 100.1 FM. It's the half-hour program where you work on your business rather than in it. And today we are talking about a very difficult topic. I say it's difficult because it's fraught with danger, and people are concerned about privacy, and people are concerned about their client information and their own information, and really the misunderstanding around it, which is why we brought a professional in today. We've got Gavin Vermaas here from RightServe, and RightServe is really are the experts in small business, bringing in small business and bringing them onto the cloud. And that's where the misnomer sits. I think everybody's understanding of the cloud gets a little bit tricky. But we were talking about, but just before the break, we were talking about privacy. And just while we were having a community service announcement, you mentioned that the onus of the business to keep that information private. And it's as simple as a name and an email address. That is privacy information, isn't it, really?
Correct.
Putting those two things together means that you've got access to someone's data. So the laws changed, what was it, within the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think it was about 2 years ago. I'm no legal expert here, but this immediately had an impact on the IT industry because the first thing that anybody does with any business card is, put it in their phone, put it in, their contact list in Outlook. That immediately gets synchronized with all sorts of IT systems. And, as a business owner, when you're asked by your customers, or there is an incident, for instance, where a customer may want to either not do business with you anymore or demand that certain information is changed, you need to be able to answer certain questions. Where is that data? Where was it placed? How many places was it put? And can we, for instance, change or delete it? So a lot of business questions about the cloud, for business particularly, have come from that sort of quarter. So
yeah, and it's important to know that everybody out there needs to be aware of the fact that onus is on them. That if they're not able to maintain that data, be able to remove people from the list, or even securely ensure that data is there. I mean, identity theft is not a small thing anymore, and putting pieces of a puzzle together, it's not that difficult on various sources.
Particularly if you're doing any form of e-commerce, there's sort of a layer of certification, if I can call it that I would say the average business requires around contemplating using the cloud. And we haven't actually spoken about any of the benefits of the cloud. We should do that too. But there's another layer that you need to contemplate if you're collecting, particularly credit card information. And there are obviously service providers out there who can not only assist data centers and cloud services that assist if you are looking to do e-commerce related stuff and avail yourself of cloud services to do that. So all of these things they really unpack into how you handle your customers' private data.
Something to be aware of. So if you haven't investigated it at the moment, a good place to start might be your professional association. They would be able to guide you on what the requirements are specific to your industry, particularly if you're in financial or you're in accounting. But anyone really, they should be able to guide you with what you should and shouldn't do with that particular data. So let's talk about the benefits. I think everyone understand it's helpful to be in the cloud. I mean, as an admin expert, my understanding is that, well, classic example this week, my laptop died. Laptop, 5 years, it just died. And do you know what I went? It's a hassle. Literally, it was just a hassle. It was just like, I'm going to have to buy a new laptop. That was all. Because every single thing, all I need is in the cloud. I can work at home in exactly the same capacity as I can on a friend's laptop, which is what I'm doing now. I've borrowed someone's laptop and I've created a new profile and I'm accessing everything in the cloud.
Yes.
Nothing has changed. And the assurity of that was joyous. Because just to know that just because my laptop died, I haven't lost a thing.
Yes.
So I think everybody understands the move away from the server under the desk that has gone kaput up to cloud-based things.
Yes.
But what are the added benefits apart from being able to access everything anywhere to a business to have all of their data in the cloud?
Look, I think that first of all, a lot of the cloud services developed out of the need for flexibility. And it was flexibility that was driven either by a small IT department that was, under the pump, or perhaps new requirements at the front of a business, sales, marketing, the ability to deliver, say, a new online service.
And the importance of websites now and
right.
how that was all becoming the shop front for businesses.
That's right. And on the face of it, cloud services look like they're a little bit more cost effective than, say, buying servers and putting them under your desk and connecting them to the internet, which is true. There is a lot of benefit being able to leverage the investment that huge companies, and I'm talking about, the likes of Amazon, the likes of Microsoft themselves, have made in very, very significant infrastructure. And I'm talking about hardware and network and firewall infrastructure. So there is some definite cost benefit. These companies are way down that average cost curve. So
we're piggybacking on their knowledge, their investment,
their
their
big bank account. Yeah.
Nice.
Absolutely, yeah. So, but obviously this comes with a certain, set of challenges as well. And obviously security being, the main one, but also the cloud has got to a point now where it's quite complex to navigate what services to avail yourself of. It's quite difficult to know. It's evolving very, very quickly as well. So you log on to a cloud portal, 6 months later, that cloud portal looks completely different. So your challenges are, in terms of, say, training and knowledge and, just being able to administer these types of services, because you're pretty much doing the same thing that you were 6 months ago from a business perspective. Your cloud services may have evolved. You've got to understand how that changes and how to manage that process. Remember that you're in Australia. Unfortunately, small business, medium business, we're always going to be sort of small fishes in a really, really rather large pond. If you want to get some of that cost benefit, and you're dealing with these big companies like AWS. So you'll notice that the sort of byline on Rightserve is hybrid cloud. And if you're about to ask me what that is, it's sort of It's trying to mitigate some of those challenges to say, look, it's just impossible for a small business to have this evolving set of cloud services like a big customer, perhaps one of the big online e-retailers, Walmart, Myer would have. They have their own IT departments to take on those, training challenges and such like. So what we're trying to do is offer small and medium-sized businesses some of the cost benefits of cloud-based computing, combined with the options of not necessarily throwing away everything that they had. Maybe they had their own data center infrastructure, their own wide area networks.
Their own IT department.
Their own IT departments, yeah. There would definitely be change of skill, training requirement going on there. But there'd be a pathway at least to say, all right, look, we're not going to throw out the baby with the bathwater here. We do want to understand how we can leverage some of the cost and flexibility benefits of the cloud. But there are certain core systems that were just either impossible to migrate or were just not comfortable with letting that stuff go into whatever data center you've assured us it'll go into, and we need to plot out some sort of path, and that's really what we do with this hybrid cloud concept, is piece together a set of services, both on site, in other words, at your business, as well as in the cloud.
So it's using the existing infrastructure, and I guess it's interesting what you talk about with not just infrastructure but knowledge.
Yes.
You don't want to not only throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to the actual stuff that you've bought, from an environmental perspective especially, but also for the people that you've trained and invested in, and you have to see them as a piece of capital well, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's I like that idea that you're moulding the existing structure with something that, you can utilise and leverage off what the big companies are doing with their investment as well.
Yes.
And I think it brings me back to what you were saying originally with things changing so quickly. The risk with any piece of software, and I guess if you think of your cloud server provider as a piece of software, if you're not in there a lot and constantly and you're not using that piece of software all the time, you forget, you get out of the habit, and changes happen. So it's kind of where all the software is going. You've got Microsoft Office, you've got 365 subscription, you let it update constantly in the background. So the changes are quite small and incremental, and you don't notice them. If you don't update your software for 12 months, suddenly it's this brand new interface. All the shortcuts are gone. You don't know how to navigate your way around the system, and it's not such a small jump. So maybe that's the same when it comes to accessing your cloud or jumping into your website, even things like WordPress with all the updates that they do. It's almost, you need to be finger on the pulse. You need to see all those changes happen incrementally. Otherwise, it's too massive and it's too hard to learn.
It is very much so. I mean, a good example is all of the software vendors, Microsoft themselves, MYOB, Xero. They've all not only taken their software to the cloud, they're on a continuous and speeding up treadmill of delivery of new features and functionality within their software, and it's almost impossible to keep up with the feature sets that they're launching. So what we're trying to do is say, look, there are different pieces of software which enable different departments in each business. Some of those pieces of software lend themselves more towards cloud computing, migrating to the cloud, or what you were implying there, picking up on a new service from the cloud. Those three options are immediately sort of implying the hybrid cloud concept that, you may think, well, hang on a second, I'm now going to migrate from MYOB to Xero, which means, by the way, Xero is only cloud-based, which means I'm going to do a complete shift of all of my accounting information to the cloud. Some companies don't want to do that. They want to still use MYOB, but they want to avail themselves of some sort of flexible cloud-based service to run it. So we can help them do that as well. We can take them into cloud infrastructure. That's called platform as a service in the cloud. Still MYOB. The ladies running it at the office are still interfacing with exactly the same software. So the impact is less.
And that's the thing, it's the retraining impact as well. And we all know as small businesses, taking on your employees and retraining existing employees is a huge chunk of time, and it takes a lot of energy and out of the company. We need to be focusing on other things.
Correct.
So thinking of that, I like that idea that the hybrid cloud structure is a use of your current facilities and also starting to take that step, and you can take it. I guess you can take it further and further into the cloud as you go.
Yes, and quite honestly, I think that whenever we sit across the table from anybody and we start talking about software applications specifically, we're never talking about. We're never recommending that anybody jump in at version 1. And you might have heard or alluded to this in the past, but the first release of any sort of new technology, infrastructure, There's probably edge-of-the-ledge type companies that have got the budget.
Microsoft 10.
That's right. But most of the companies I've met aren't like that. So cloud's evolved now to a point where the major vendors, who are basically AWS, VMware and Microsoft, are all in sort of version 3, 4, 5 of their cloud infrastructure. And it's more stable, it's more reliable, it's more flexible. It's not necessarily going to lock you in. Now, having said that, it is quite difficult to migrate services from, say, AWS to Azure, from VMware to Azure.
So different server providers. It's difficult to pick stuff up and move it.
And part of the reason for that is because what has begun to happen is that there's bundling going on. So these large cloud infrastructure providers will bundle together a very, very nice backup or service or replication service, and you'll commit your company and your 100 employees to that, and dragging it out of, say, Google Drive and putting it in an infrastructure that's, say, based on Azure or VMware. You can do. But remember that you're probably going to be using a completely different set of software.
Interface.
That's right, which means retraining, all those things. So you're not getting away from some of the fundamentals of what software is and how it's delivered.
Yeah, it's an important part to factor in, isn't it? That education and the interface and how your employees operate, because it's almost like taking on another employee, adding in a different type of...
It is.
Interface. Yeah. And I think what's funny, talking about that hybrid, that example you gave to me when we met of the company that had huge amounts of data very comfortably in the cloud, but the chief financial officer utterly refused to allow those accounts to be anywhere except for under his desk, somewhere that he could feel very comfortable and knew where they were. So that's another example of tailoring a package for that particular company's needs and wants, so that they've got the hybrid of being something that they want to see tangibly safe under the desk. Never mind if the business burns down. But anyway, look, we're just going to take another short break on Small Biz Matters. You are listening to 100.1 FM with Alexi and Gavin. We're talking about all things cloud. And, of course, if you have missed any of today's show, you can catch up on smallbizmatters.com.au, where all of the blogs and podcasts are. We'll be back after this. So, Gavin, now that I've said my website many, many times, that brings us, it's a nice segue actually, to the way we can look bigger online than we really are.
Yes.
I think some people, I think there's a danger in that, because one of the things that people like to engage with small businesses, and you find bigger and bigger companies doing more and more business with small business, is because they know that someone is on the end of the phone. They know that they can tangibly talk to a real person who's based here, and that person will be available to them, not just 9 to 5. And that's one of the things that we can feel quite proud of in the small business community. So, yes, we can look bigger online, and we want to have a bigger presence and make ourselves look professional, but there is the risk of looking like we're too big and people go, I thought that was a small business. I don't want to deal with some medium to large size business. So how do you kind of reconcile that, the balance?
Well, using IT and cloud type services and software that goes along with that, small companies can quite easily provide their customers with a whole series of automation, customer service, and levels of intimacy, basically, that a much, much larger company historically was required for. We are also a Microsoft Dynamics partner. We specialize in deploying CRM systems from Microsoft. We do them in the cloud, we do them on site, we do them in hybrid cloud environments. And one of the reasons why we got into that was because of the fact that a lot of small businesses want to look bigger than they actually are, and there's a lot of customer touch points, be it support case emails, updates, be it servicing information, redirects, links, FAQs that may not even be able to be serviced from the website per se, but can be serviced with, say, outbound SMSs, updates on Twitter feeds, updates on Facebook pages. Yeah,
so it's that accessibility and the advertising points that makes us look big. And the accessibility. You still have that accessibility, don't you, if you can show that.
by the same token, you don't necessarily lose, as a small business, you don't lose the ability to lift up the phone, which is what our customers like. It's what I'm sure all of your customers like, and talk to a human being in a cogent manner, and be able to get through an issue quite quickly. That never goes away. I'm talking about all the other aspects of communication and customer touch points. So cloud-based services are quite good at providing small and medium-sized businesses that type of advantage. So it's eminently possible to piece together that type of system where you are supporting a larger and larger customer base with fewer and fewer people, and get some sort of operational leverage to do that using cloud services.
And that level of automation, which means that you're not having to do the IT part of it or the advertising through online servicing part of it all the time.
Correct.
You can
automate a lot of it,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, sorry, let me just say this. There's only sort of so much that you can automate. If you phone us up and you're talking about a particular problem, we can communicate updates and then the like. But at some point, somebody has to provide a service, lift up a phone, respond, deliver. That never goes away. But I think there's an element of additional leverage to grow your customer base that is definitely possible.
So it's quite important that we consider those IT things. Well, I mean, it's the IT decisions that it's now sort of intermingled with advertising and with marketing and with CRM, and it's not just IT anymore.
Yeah, very much so. What you're talking about is the multi-channel approach to engaging your audience. So, your Twitter feed, your Facebook page, your website, email, SMS, any type of customer touch point. Okay, and cloud-based services, particularly CRM software that does this, either delivered from the cloud, is very good at doing this type of stuff now. Not only outbound, but the latest software is now doing listening type functions, where if somebody puts an awful post on your Twitter or your Facebook page, it can actually do something like log a case, escalate it, email the marketing director or the managing director of the company. So that level of feedback from is also possible too. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's that level of automation, which I think is quite exciting for small business, because obviously we all wear lots and lots of different hats.
Correct. And it's possible to avail yourself of that type of system without having, a huge IT budget and 100 employees and a call center service. I just want to mention one other thing that I've noticed about small and medium-sized businesses. A lot of them are contemplating offshoring some level of administration, legal, accounting. Okay.
I'm pulling a face. Those of you who are listening on a radio, I'm pulling a face.
Now, sorry, can I just say IT, by the way, IT support has gone down that road, as I'm sure everybody has encountered. Try and phone the, Telstra call center, and you're talking to someone in the Philippines. You're talking to someone in Hyderabad. So I won't say that there weren't some lessons learned there, because I think there were. What I've noticed is that, especially medium-sized businesses that do this, they've had to incorporate these people into their support teams. There's just no other way around it. If you're a very big organization and you get up one day and feel like suing Microsoft, go right ahead. They're not really going to care too much about the small consumer when they're a big multinational. But if you're a medium-sized company on the North Shore in Sydney, okay, you've still got to care about your customers. So the way you do that is you need to be quite careful about whoever you pick in terms of one of these offshore companies who are providing you with services. Generally, they have a whole series of options and flexible IT connectivity. And what that means is, once again, it ends up being a hybrid cloud solution, because we've got to connect what they're doing in terms of entering tickets, dealing with cases, sending emails on your behalf to your team in Sydney.
And your infrastructure in Sydney.
Correct. Now, all of that, you've got to run through those same security issues that we're talking about. We've got to run through the same sort of set of requirements in terms of how your customers are treated and how you'd like to, perform, say, marketing tasks and stuff like that. So a medium-sized business is only able to contemplate doing that with hybrid cloud type services, unless that person in, Philippines or Vietnam or India or wherever is somehow incorporated into your IT systems, they're not going to be able to be effective. You know what I mean?
And that comes down to training, and it comes down to ensuring that those people are almost employed by your company rather than an outsourced company.
Exactly right.
It is one of my it's one of my bugbears. Excuse me. No, I don't have a problem with offshore companies necessarily if they can do it. MyOb is a really good example of this. It's one of the things that I did as a bookkeeper working with MyOb. Really appreciate. They had an awesome team. I mean, awesome. They were based in Manila. They answered. I mean, this is 10 years ago. I'm sure things have changed.
Right.
There's probably a lot of people screaming at the radio right now. But they would answer every complex, difficult, easy question with the same level of professionalism. And it was always the same person who answered it. And I pretty much knew the entire team by the time I'd been in this company for 5 years. But they were good. So there is the opportunity for companies to do it well. But you only have to do it once or twice badly before people start scrambling and getting annoyed and making other people aware that they're annoyed about these things.
Alexi, I think you're 100% on the money. I think if you are contemplating doing this, the hard lessons learned are you have to be able to identify actual individuals who are going to spend a certain predefined amount of time doing whatever administrative marketing tasks that you want. You have to spend some time properly managing that process in terms of getting them up to speed as to
operation manuals.
That's correct, and training. And then what we do as the hybrid cloud IT provider is connect them so that they can, for instance, view all of your online videos about how you should and shouldn't be talking to your customers, access all of the files, obviously, within security and parameters which you specify, and be able to feel like from Skype chat sessions through to, perhaps, audio-video conferencing, that they are part of the team. Now, that I've noticed is a more successful outsourcing path. Okay, the less successful ones are this amorphous sort of call center type concept. And
you pay a call center, they pay their people. God knows what to do.
That's never going to work.
No, and they're not going to care, and they're not going to have the care factor that does. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realise is it's hard to let go in the first place.
Yeah,
you're not only letting go, but you need to let go of the fact that these people who are not, they're just not going to care. Nobody cares as much about our own businesses as we do, not even our employees. So there's a little bit of a letting go there. But I think if you have someone, if you have someone here, you're going to be able to train them more successfully. You're going to be able to empower them with the knowledge about your client base and all the nuances and the information that you want them to have to service your clients correctly. You can't do that with someone. So why would you spend 3 times as long training someone overseas who is less likely to stick around than you can do more effectively here? There's also the cultural differences, being able to speak to someone face to face and empower them that way versus trying to explain to someone, like you said, through videos and through Skype. That all works, but it takes longer.
It does,
and you have to factor in your time as well. So when people say to me, what do you think about overseas VAs? I say, why would you do that when for almost, it's going to be more expensive, but it's going to be less expensive in the long run when you don't have to retrain someone, because that person, every 3 weeks, you've got a new person.
Yes, correct.
So I think you really need to think about that. I'm just not a fan, particularly from admin perspective.
Right.
There are a lot of things that in Australian compliancy situations that you know about that you can't teach someone who's based overseas to understand when it comes to Australian consumer law, for example. Simple things like that.
That is correct, yeah.
So, that's one of my bugbears is, as I said, I don't have a problem with larger companies doing offshoring and if it can be done well, if they are employees of the organisation. I think that's really important rather than buying it from an offshore processing company.
Correct.
Goodness knows what they do to their staff. doesn't mind thinking about.
It's a real issue, yeah.
So that brings us back to the really one of the points of Small Biz is to bring people like yourself on the show, experts in their field who are locally based, who you can go to a coffee with in a suburb near you.
Yes, I'm a real person.
A real person. I'm looking at him.
Not a bot.
Yeah. And it's important. So if you out there have a skill that you'd like to share with our listeners and you think it's pertinent for small business to know about, then please get in touch with us. But look, thank you for coming on the show today.
It's a pleasure.
It's been awesome. It's every time we speak, I feel more knowledgeable about the cloud, squishy.
Absolutely.
It's not a squishy white thing in the sky anymore.
Yes.
And of course, you can catch today's blogs and podcasts available on our website, smallbizmatters.com.au. We'll see you all next week, where I'm not sure if we've got another guest, or I might be doing that show I was talking about a couple of weeks ago about the ATO. I'm literally, Gavin, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to open my laptop, and I'm going to walk around the ATO website on air.
Okay.
Because it's getting better. They are getting better. They're interfacing better with people, and I thought it'd be interesting to see how easy it is.
Make sure you sort out your dual factor authentication before you get on air.
Yes.
You need, I think I logged on and I spent 20 minutes
Oh my
trying
God. I know.
their SMS
Oz
verification
key,
codes and
the
OzKey certificates. And
I know,
yes.
It's insane.
It's insane. And sorry, can I just say, that's the right thing to do. We've got a range of customers, and the ATOs themselves have implemented systems that are this dual factor stuff.
Double authentication.
Absolutely.
I'm a big fan.
It's the right thing to do.
And those of you who are listening are on Xero at the moment, do switch that on. It's really dead easy to use. It's too easy to have your laptop open and then just let the password be saved and move on when you've got a lot of financial data in things like Xero. So
it's a good idea.
So use those processes. Look, thanks again for coming on the show.
Pleasure.
We could talk for another hour about this stuff. You're listening to Triple H 100.1 FM. I'll see you all next week on Small Biz Matters, the half-hour program where you work on your business rather than in it.